Again in studio, this time about picture. Of course, there are different forms of the photo, and one photo can be made from 100 photo, and some parts might be extremely evil when it comes to fame. So it's very important to distance yourself from other forms of extremely evil and actually focus on different forms of circuits. Of course, that can also be some sort of illusion if you don't understand Dale servers. The Dale servers inside are extremely complex, and of course, if you build your own Dell server or build the circuits by yourself, of course, it's not easy to see different forms of machinery inside, and you can actually also integrate different forms of the circuits, not exactly by your wish, but you must need to know the basics of the server. Of course, there is also the main board inside of the PC structure, and there are different forms of silicium chips. Of course, you can also buy different forms of Dell servers from the shops or store, and you can have like from 1 to 10 Dell servers. It also depends what type of machinery you need. There are different forms of the charts about the wallets, but actually those Dell servers are running everything. So it's very important also to keep ethics on the web, but also to have your own servers. To understand the Dell servers actually start, you don't need to spend a lot of money for different Dell servers, and of course there's going to be millions of mistake, and other people might disturb you all the time. So if you are actually working or building server, you should actually think about that people are going to disturb you all the time. So maybe the best thing to think about the society or community is to think that people are extreme noise sometimes. And to get rid of people, you should actually look on them as users. If you look on people like users, you can actually use the Dell servers much better. And of course, if you have the team for some sort of simple engineering of material part of servers, you can have more units in those servers, which can of course run more different site for cosmetics or beauty or different forms of the profiles that ladies are usually using. Of course, a lot of chips are made from Intel, and in Intel fabrics there is really a lot of server stuff, but also the ventilation is very important. Different chips are actually not chips, but chips are actually integrated in the main circuit. And if you are actually storing some cryptos, you should actually think also about the fancy ventilation. The ventilation is actually very important, and it's not easy to build some sort of simple store together with the bank also. Intel Air AC is also some sort of simple forms that can replace different forms of cards also. But of course, with programs, you can also see what's happening in your Dell server. To understand Dell servers, you can actually build much quicker site and domains, but also do not forget on Sectigo, which is of course certificate to protect your site. To understand different forms of the material engine, it's not easy. And of course, most of people might be extremely confused, especially ladies, when they think about Dell. The Dell, of course, it's not just computer, but it's some sort of simple server that can actually use also serve desktops. Some sort of, you don't need to serve millions of desktops, but like Macrans, thousands of simple desktops together with the Dell server towers. Those towers are complex, are more simple, but of course you can also build one by yourself. To understand those towers, it's not easy, but also how they are built on inside. Of course, there are different chips, but also to understand that you can have from 1 to 10 units on one simple Dell server. When you are going to understand those servers, of course, you'll see On the back side, you also have different forms of the switches or inputs. The Dell Tower servers are extremely complex because some are very, very little and some are actually much, much bigger. And some looks very fancy and some looks just an ordinary PC. So if you're going to build by yourself a PC, probably it's the best to think about some sort of simple Dell servers, or if you think about how they looked 10 years ago, you are going to see that those 10 years ago are actually much, much cheaper, but also not looking so fancy. Of course, to understand BIOS is also important, our simple microinds field, which is of course built from simple coding, also some Java, and of course simple Linux and nothing more complex. It also uses some sort of ocean microinds forum, but its philosophy with millions of the picture of ocean and the microinds on it. Of course, every individual can decide what that means for them. And ocean, the picture is of course not simple because it represents the beauty or purity, and it's not easy to think about that. So, to share some basic philosophy, usually it's very important, especially in finance, because all the bankers are just thinking about their own profit. Actually, bankers do not know their servers very well. So, if you see this film, probably you know more than 90% of bankers, which is, of course, very, very strange. In extreme case, of course, you can also use T620. That's a tower server which configure around 20 units you can actually integrate inside. And that type of servers in Dell are actually quite fascinating. There can be millions of domains on servers like that, and it's not easy to think about that type of server. Of course, you can also think about something more little, something like with 20 units. The 20 unit server, of course, can easily host around 20 sites, and of course, those sites are some sort of beauty representers. You know, women are going to upload different forms of fancy photos on their profile, and everybody is going to enjoy in their looks. It's very important to build something for community. So once you have over 1 million photos, you can also think about some sort of bear drop server, which is extremely, extremely big. It might actually be bigger than 1 meter. But if you look for something under 1 meter with thousands of units, you can also think about simple forums from Japan. Of course, those Japan versions are not T140 Delve, but are much, much more simple. About Japan quality, me do not know for sure, but probably that type of servers are actually slightly cheaper or having low price. Actually much lower than if you buy any forum of USA or some sort of simple server from EU. The Dell servers in Europe, of course, must develop also on different forums together with Intel. But if you are a little bit of technique, of course, you can also take the simple shape of PC, and inside you can give some sort of Dell communication circuit and a little bit of Intel's or Dell AMC. Of course, the Dell microinds forms are not simple, and if you're thinking about that, also think about Sectigo. That's actually a certificate for the site if you have any form of website. Of course, if you are also crying like me on different forms of websites, then probably you should also check my book. And Crystal inside is describing very difficult very, very, very difficult situations that can actually appear on the web. Sometimes it's not easy to think about all different type of shape about the Dell AMC, but the Dell simple forms of security together with servers. There are a lot of different forms of the chips and circuits like 9092 and Inspiron 660. Of course, there's also the circuit Vostra 460 together with microencoding coding not so simple, but also E93839. Of course, the microenc 900, it's not easy circuits, and if you think from that perspective, you are going to code much different. To understand different wire inside the circuits, you are also going to see that those circuits need some simple cooling, and that's where ventilators come in. Of course, you can also think about something smaller and not very big Dell units. You can actually take some simple forums together with simple website and not to think about extreme big things. The Dell also offers some small things, and sometimes also to think about small things is very important. Small things actually sometimes can build very simple function, but also simple forms of the shape.